Imagine a love story that, well, it defies time. One born from what gets called a clinical error, and it unfolds amidst these grim cholera epidemics.
Yeah, and shaped by, grand ambition, but also this surprising intimacy.
Exactly. So today we're taking a deep dive into this really richly detailed world where personal destiny is just completely intertwined with the fate of a city, a Caribbean city.
Hmm.
Our mission is to pull out the most compelling bits from this narrative. We're focusing on the early lives, the defining moments of Dr. Juvenal Urbino,
Bosnian physician, yeah?
who's determined to modernize his, frankly, decaying hometown.
Yeah.
And then there's Fermina Daza, the spirited woman he marries.
And we can't forget Florentino Ariza, his parallel journey, completely heartbroken, consumed by this enduring, unrequited love.
Right. So the goal is to unpack how these individual journeys, societal pressures, unexpected encounters, how they all lead to really different understandings of love and life.
It's quite a story.
So let's start with Dr. Juvenal Urbino. He's coming back from Paris, advanced medical studies. He's 28.
And hailed as the most desirable of bachelors, learned, refined science, but also dancing, piano, the whole
He
package.
sounds impressive. So what were his expectations coming home? And what was that first moment like, stepping off the ship?
Oh, it was just sheer disillusionment, a real shock. He'd been in this romantic Paris, languid accordions, insatiable
Right,
lovers.
the idealized version.
Totally. He'd even convinced himself he wouldn't trade it. But the second he saw his hometown, the motionless buzzards, the laundry hanging out,
Mm.
he was hit by this unmerciful reality. The book says the heart's memory eliminates the bad and magnifies the good. His nostalgia was a total charitable deception.
So the reality was,
The bay had this floating blanket of drowned animals. There was this awful stench, vapors of death from open sewers, rats everywhere.
wow.
Everything just felt smaller, poorer, sadder. It really shows how memory can play tricks on you. He ended up crying in silence on the way home.
You can really feel that. And the decay wasn't just the city, right?
Right.
His family life kind of mirrored it.
Absolutely. His father, Dr. Marco Aurelio Urbino, had died from cholera.
Right, 6 years before.
Yeah, and his mother was just smuttered by mourning. His two sisters basically fodder for the convent,
And the family home, that crumbling palace.
the former palace of the Marquis de Casalduero. Yeah, it was falling apart. Missing marble, weeds, dusty fountain. It was a direct symbol of the city's decline.
But that despair actually kind of lit a fire under him.
It did. It's interesting. After this restless, awful first night, seeing the place as rubble-strewn, he flipped. He overcame the bitterness, found an easy justification for his surrender, and just gave in to habit.
He decided to stay and fix it.
Pretty much. He told himself that this sad, oppressive world is mine, I'm responsible. So he immediately took over his father's office.
And brought in the new medicine?
Exactly. Ditched the old romantic medicine for the new French school, put up all his diplomas. But this renovating spirit, it definitely clashed with the older doctors.
Oh, so.
They were still into atavistic superstitions, things like putting beds in pots of water to stop disease, or wearing fancy chamois gloves in the operating room for asepsis.
Wow, gloves for elegance, not really for hygiene then.
Right. They really resented his modern ideas.
And his big focus became sanitation.
Uh,
He really declared war on the city's filth.
he did. Those old Spanish sewers. Just open ditches, basically. An immense breeding ground for rats.
Horrifying.
He fought like hell to get a closed system built and pushed for mandatory training so the poor would build proper latrines, stop throwing garbage into these swamps of putrefaction.
It sounds like a huge undertaking, just changing habits.
A massive battle against deeply ingrained ways of life.
And then there was the drinking water issue, with its own superstitions, right? The water worms.
Oh, yeah, fascinating stuff. People use these underground cisterns full of scum and wooden collectors with stone filters.
Okay.
But the local belief was that water worms were animes, supernatural creatures, kind of like spirits.
Spirits that courted young women.
Exactly, and could cause trouble if scorned in love. He'd seen the supposed chaos at Lazaro Conde's house.
So what was his scientific take?
He realized they were just mosquito larvae. And that changed everything for him about public health, seeing how these animes could slip right through the filters. Science versus folklore right there.
And speaking of local beliefs, we have to mention the scrotal hernia thing.
Oh, you can't skip that. It's incredible.
Men endured it with patriotic insolence. A large rupture was a sign of virility.
Yes. A symbol of virility. So much so that some people actually opposed enriching the water because they thought it might prevent this honorable rupture.
That is just astonishing, the cultural resistance he must have faced.
Truly immense. And it wasn't just water or hernias, the public market. He was appalled.
Describe it for us.
Just a vast extension of cleared land, basically a swamp of blood, offal from the slaughterhouse next door, mixed with sewage filth, buzzards, rats, dogs, fighting over it all.
Grim. So he wanted a proper covered market.
Like the ones in Europe, yeah. Like the Boquerías in Barcelona. He saw his city clearly with the eyes of truth, but he still loved it.
He had that great quote, didn't he?
Yeah, really poignant. How noble this city must be, for we have spent 400 years trying to finish it off, and we still have not succeeded. It shows this deep affection, even while he's desperate to save it.
And the city lived under the shadow of cholera. His own father died in an epidemic years before. What were burials like back then?
Just horrific. They ran out of space, buried people under church floors and convent patios. The main cemetery had that inscription.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Chillin'.
Exactly. They ended up burying bodies on 3 levels without delay and without coffins. Had to use a cattle ranch as a new cemetery. Gives you a sense of the scale.
And his father, though a hero, used methods that were more charitable than scientific.
Right. It shows medicine was still evolving. Compassion sometimes trumped effective treatment, which maybe even helped the plague spread.
How did that affect Juvenal, losing his father that way?
Profoundly. That feverish letter his father wrote from isolation, the delayed grief, and then the sudden, awful realization of his own mortality.
He saw himself in his father.
Exactly. He knew he was identical to him, also as mortal. It cemented his drive towards scientific medicine to conquer what killed his father.
But his Paris studies, especially with Professor Prouse and the Cordon Sanitaires, prepared him.
Oh, absolutely. Those quarantine lines were key. So when a new cholera case appeared less than a year after he got back, this charity patient with a strange blue coloration
He knew immediately.
instantly recognized the enemy, alerted everyone, warned other ports, quarantined the ship. Total efficiency.
And he shut down that idea about firing cannons to purify the air.
Yeah. His response was perfect. Save that powder for when the liberals come. We are no longer in the Middle Ages. Just brilliant.
So his modern approach actually worked.
It did. His sanitary rigor stopped a full epidemic. Cholera became endemic, lingering, but not that widespread crisis again. People finally started listening to him. Progress happened.
And it's right at this peak, this moment of public triumph, that he gets, as he put it, struck by the lightning of his love for Fermina Daza.
Which he called a clinical error. Yeah.
So tell us about that first encounter. He's called to treat 18-year-old Fermina for suspected cholera.
Right. He arrives worried about a new outbreak. But her house, despite the rundown exterior, is this haven inside. Harmony of beauty, astonishing light, a beautiful patio.
The stark contrast.
Totally. But the meeting itself, pretty strained. He was all business, hyper-focused on cholera symptoms, even examining her chest.
And her impression of him.
She thought he was cold, a pedant, incapable of loving anyone but himself. All medicine, no heart, basically.
Yet he comes back just a week later, unannounced, while she's painting.
Yeah, clearly something shifted for him. He examines her again, but this time through the window, takes her pulse, checks her tongue.
Through the window? That's odd.
Very. And then he drops that line, "You are like a new-sprung rose." Poetic, but totally jarring in that context.
And she reacts how?
She's embarrassed. Her friends are giggling. She thinks he's mocking her. So she slams the window shut in his face.
Which leads to chaos.
Utter chaos. He stumbles back into this cage of perfumed crows. They freak out, and he gets drenched in this whorish perfume. Not exactly a smooth start to romance.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So understandably, Fermini's father, Lorenzo Daza, is furious.
Oh, yeah. He storms down, throws the window open, makes her apologize right then and there, even though she's pale with rage.
A public humiliation for her.
Definitely. She does this forced theatrical curtsy and apologizes. Then, bizarrely, Lorenzo invites Juvenal for coffee and anisette.
Strange hospitality.
Very. Juvenal, who usually doesn't drink much, gets almost drunk, starts hallucinating Fermina around the house. Lorenzo's slurring, trying to smooth things over. It's weird. And Juvenal has this ominous dream about funeral bells later.
But Juvenal wasn't deterred by the crows or the awkwardness. He goes big next, right? The serenade.
He hires a famous pianist, Romeo Lucich, to serenade her. Very public.
And Fermina's private reaction.
She wished she could dump a chamber pot on his head, like in the old stories. She wanted no part of it.
But her father.
Lorenzo Daza welcomed them in, offered brandy. He was clearly pushing this match, trying everything, guilt-tripping her about her dead mother, even trying to join the fancy social club with Juvenal.
He got rejected from the club, though.
Repeatedly.
Mhm.
But interestingly, he did teach Juvenal chess, which became this lifelong obsession for the doctor.
Then Juvenal sends his first letter with the fancy monogram.
The JUC monogram, yeah. Fermina has this weird dream about his tongue depressor being made of delicious metal.
Okay. And the letter itself.
She waits days to open it. When she does, she's actually impressed by its simplicity and seriousness. It calms her anger.
But then,
Then she remembers Florentino Ariza's letters, the perfumed ones, feels ashamed, and burns Juvenal's letter. Sighs. Poor man. Her past is definitely still present.
but he kept writing.
Oh yes, 3 more letters, showing more impatience. One even had violet pastilles inside.
Candy. Okay. And then the anonymous letters started.
Yeah, the poison pen letters. Childish handwriting, accusing her of using love potions on the doctor, threatening public disgrace.
How did she react to that?
First, she wanted to argue, convince the writer they were wrong, but more letters came, and she just got furious, felt helpless, wanted to attack the sender. It made her feel totally isolated, realizing she had no allies against these attacks.
And then the really weird thing. The black doll from Martinique.
So bizarre. She thought Juvenal sent it at first. It was charming, but it seemed to grow. Its clothes got too small, its shoes burst.
Creepy.
Super creepy. Filled her with this fear of African spells. She later found out it wasn't him, just some random shrimp seller. But the mystery was never solved, and it always creeped her out.
It sounds like Juvenal was running out of options, so he turned to the church. Or rather, the school.
His last resort, yeah. He asks Sister Franca de la Luz, the superior at Fermina's old school, to intervene.
But Fermina hated that school. And the sister.
Hated her. The mere sight of the sister made scorpions crawl in her belly. It was definitely not a subtle move by Juvenal.
What did the sister offer?
Honorable reinstatement to the school she despised, and dangled this priceless old gold rosary, calling it a gift from divine providence. Basically, bribery.
And Fermina's response.
Complete defiance. Flat refusal. When the sister threatened to get the archbishop involved, Fermina just said, "Let him come."
Wow.
The sister was exasperated. "My poor child, you are still thinking about that man," meaning Florentino, then called her a mule. It shows Fermina's incredible stubbornness.
Things shifted, though, when her cousin Hildebranda arrived for Christmas.
Yes, Hildebranda Sanchez. A breath of fresh air from Riohacha. Vibrant, open, they bonded instantly.
How so?
Naked bathing, comparing bodies, sharing secrets, smoking stolen highwaymen's cigars. Just total intimacy, completely different from Fermina's closed-off life. Hildebranda really brought her out.
And Hildebranda had opinions on Fermina's love life.
Definitely. She had this universal conception of love, couldn't understand Fermina rejecting Florentino. She even went to see him herself.
Really? What happened?
She visited him at the telegraph office, got him to help write a message to her own lover. Her assessment afterwards was so perfect. He is ugly and sad, but he is all love.
That says so much about him. Meanwhile, Fermina felt stuck.
Totally in this social limbo. Didn't fit with old school friends, didn't fit with neighbors, and her relationship with her father was distant. His business was shady, he gambled.
And then that night he came home drunk.
Yeah, declared, "We are ruined." It was this crushing moment for Fermina, realizing she was alone in the world. Just her and this vague, unreliable father.
Hildebranda tried to liven things up.
Music, fireworks, but then realized there was no one to invite. Really highlights Fermina's isolation. But Hildebranda also pushed Fermina back into the city, into her past.
How does she do?
Took her on tours to all the significant spots from her time with Florentino. The park bench, the streets he followed her down, their letter hiding places, the school, the cemetery where he played violin.
Reliving it all.
Exactly. And it led to this huge realization for Fermina.
The aha moment.
Yes. At the Arcade of the Scribes, she suddenly saw her love for Florentino as nothing more than an illusion. Realized her whole recent past, every place, every moment, seemed to exist only by the grace of Florentino Ariza.
That's profound. A total shift in perspective.
It really was. And right around then, they had that fun, whimsical trip to the photographer.
Dressing up in grandmother's old clothes.
Corsets, hoop skirts, hats with fake fruit. Took that immortal photograph that amazingly finds its way to Florentino decades later.
But leaving the studio wasn't so fun.
No, they got mocked for looking so old-fashioned. And then who should appear but Dr. Juvenal Urbino in his fancy carriage, his landau.
Ah, the timing. So they get a ride home.
They do, and Juvenal clearly manipulates it to make the ride longer. There's this playful word game.
And Hildebranda starts flirting.
Oh, yeah. Takes off her boots, wants to take off her hoop skirt, the wire cage, while Juvenal covers his eyes. It gets pretty suggestive.
But Firmina puts a stop to it.
Drastically. She signals to Hildebranda she'll jump out of the moving carriage if they don't go straight home. She was terrified.
So the mood shifts completely.
Instantly.
Right.
The game ends. Juvenal squeezes Firmina's ring finger and says, "I am waiting for your answer." Very direct.
And Firmina's reaction to Hildebranda afterwards.
Furious, calls her a whore. What a whore you are. Clearly conflicted and angry about the whole situation she's being pushed into. That night was restless, full of nightmares about Juvenal. And the next morning,
She makes her decision.
writes that letter, quickly, accepting his proposal to speak with her father, a huge turning point, maybe driven as much by pressure as by choice.
Okay, let's pivot now to Florentino Ariza. While all this courtship drama is happening, he's on a very different path. How did he take the news of Firmina's engagement?
It utterly destroyed him, lost his speech, appetite, just wept constantly for nights on end.
His poor mother.
Transito Ariza, yeah. She tried everything to console him, like a sweetheart, then begged his uncle to get him a job far, far away.
Which led to the telegraph job.
In Villa de Leyva. Miles away. Days of travel, high in the mountains, no mail, no telegraph, completely cut off.
And before he left, that final gesture.
Waltz.
Yes, his fatal, mad act of the heart. Played their waltz under her balcony at midnight. Eerily, all the dogs in the city fell silent, quieted by the spell of music.
Like an exorcism for him.
Exactly, an exorcism of relief. He felt like he'd already left years before.
So he sets off on this curative journey on the steamboat, the Pius Fifluiza. What was that like?
Rough. The boat was his floating 2-story wooden house. He had to give up his cabin, slept on a cot near the smelly salted meat. Oppressive heat, mosquitoes.
In danger, too. Civil War, cholera.
Yeah, the captain was super strict, confiscated weapons, they passed a cholera boat. Passengers pretty much lived like prisoners. It was chaotic.
How did Florentino handle it?
With mineral patience, just endured it. He saw awful things from the boat, dead bodies floating by, one without a head, a young girl.
God. Did that affect his thoughts of Firmina? The nauseating stench contaminated his memory of her. But still, everything somehow related back to her. He'd read his novels, casting them as the star-crossed lovers.
Still lost in that fantasy.
Completely. Writing letters, tearing them up, scattering them on the water. Grief and obsession just warping his reality. But then, something major happens on the boat.
The encounter.
His first sexual experience. Sudden, triumphant. An unknown woman just impaled herself on him, and it was a revelation for him.
What kind of revelation?
That his intense, almost imaginary love for Firmina could actually be replaced by real, earthly passion. A huge shift.
But he didn't know who the woman was.
No. He searched desperately but couldn't figure it out. He ended up fixating on Rosalba.
The young mother with the baby in the birdcage.
Yeah, slender and golden. Even though she was clearly devoted to her child, he clung to this profound hope that she was his mystery lover.
Why?
Maybe wishful thinking. He watched her constantly, changed seats to face her, started thinking about her even more intensely than Firmina, the mind clinging to any connection, I guess. But then Rosalba left the boat.
At Puerto Nare. And his chance was gone.
He waved too late. Her response was familiar, friendly, but it cut him to the quick because he'd hesitated. Her leaving felt like a mortal blow, shattering the Rosalba fantasy and finally loosening Firmina's grip on his memory.
So when he eventually returns, he's still processing Firmina's marriage. Jealousy, fantasies.
Yeah, even imagined her dying, then immediately felt terrible about it. Couldn't picture a world without her.
But the news she was honeymooning in Europe gave him some space.
His first real hope of forgetting, yes, knowing she'd likely live there. And that's when he grew the mustache.
The iconic waxed mustache.
The one he kept forever. A small change, but it changed his entire being. A deliberate break from his old self. And this leads him into a completely different phase, starting with the widow Nazareth.
Right, the woman he thought would cure him. Tell us about her seduction.
Oh, it was dramatic. She stripped off her mourning clothes with this incredible joy, pausing deliberately, like her movements were saluted by the cannon of the attacking troops.
Wow, she was wild mare.
Exactly. Shedding the virginity of a conventional marriage, a real force.
And she had that interesting philosophy about sex.
Ah, yes. That everyone gets a fixed allotment of lays, and if you don't use yours, you lose them forever. She even told Florentino, "I adore you because you made me a whore."
But he couldn't teach her his techniques. The bicycle on the sea?
Nope. She was enthusiastic but had zero talent for guided fornication. Her orgasms were inopportune and epidermic. An uninspired lay, as the text bluntly puts it.
And he found out about her other lovers.
By listening to her talk in her sleep, pieced together the whole navigation chart of her dreams.
Incredible. So why was she so popular if she wasn't technically skilled?
Florentino figured it must be her enough tenderness. Despite everything, she had that. But this whole experience didn't cure him, it launched him.
Into his profligate way of life.
Became a street beggar for love, and he kept records meticulously.
Notebook.
25 notebooks, 622 long-term liaisons over 50 years, all kept secret. It's this massive, hidden history of his search for connection.
Meanwhile, Fermina is preparing for marriage and having her own kind of sexual awakening.
Yeah, through her cousin's frank talk about sex, it started chipping away at her trailing clouds of innocence, an initiation into solitary love. But her wedding itself, she dreaded it.
Even though it was spectacular, sponsored by the president.
Yeah. Anonymous threats aside, her biggest fear was of the wedding night, the imminent violation. That smile hid sheer terror, a soulless grimace.
But then fate intervened with the ship's schedule.
Providential, the text calls it. The liner had to leave immediately after the reception. Chaos ensued. Drunk guests dragged ashore.
And her father crying in the street.
Tremendous loud wails like Arabs cry for their dead, sitting in dirty water, just over the top. But on the ship, that first night, Juvenal surprised her.
How so? He was gentle.
Very. The diligent physician comforted her. They just talked like old friends. She confessed her feelings about faith, preferring direct connection over rituals. That honesty was key.
And the physical intimacy unfolded slowly. Her modesty, his patience.
She turned out lights, covered cracks, joked about sleeping with a stranger. He told stories of Parisian lovers, gently caressed her, millimeter by millimeter, winning her trust.
Until that moment with her nipple.
A mortal explosion for her. But her response, "I remember it very well, and I'm still angry," that let him know they'd rounded the Cape of Good Hope. It broke the tension. Then she got curious about his body.
Boldly explored him, asked how that thing worked. He gave a scientific explanation, which she found
hilarious and blunt. How ugly it is, she said. Even uglier than a woman's thing. And agreed, his thesis was right. The body could be simpler. It's so human and funny.
And that led to their first real kiss. His realization. He didn't love her yet.
Not yet. But he believed there would be no obstacle to their inventing true love. That line is everything.
Inventing true love. Powerful.
And the next morning, she took the initiative. Gave herself, without fear, without regret, like an adventure, marked by the rows of honor on the sheet.
So he found their rhythm.
They did. Made love well, night and day, and better each time, all through Europe. Love just emerged. A miracle. It even led to her pregnancy, which they'd worried about. Connection found in unexpected ways.
So when they returned, they were changed. Was it Europe or was it love?
Impossible to untangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both happened together. Juvenal came back intellectually evolved, subscriptions to French journals, loving Anatole France, hating Zola.
Why Zola, do you think? Too gritty.
Probably. Zola's naturalism, that unvarnished look at society, likely clashed with the more idealized stuff Juvenal preferred. He also brought back lots of music, upholding his father's concert-loving legacy.
And Fermina developed her own unique style.
Totally unique. Resisted brands, bought secondhand corpses clothing, unbranded Italian shoes, that scandalous bright red parasol.
And with all the exotic jerd feathers.
An amazing collection. And they also brought back shared memories.
The 3 indelible memories.
Tales of Hoffman, the scary gondola fire in Venice, and seeing Oscar Wilde.
Juvenal regretted not meeting Victor Hugo, though.
It is one unshared regret. But the Wilde memory is telling. Fermina impulsively wanted his autograph on her glove.
And Juvenal's reaction.
Stern refusal. "If you cross that street, you will find me dead." Shows his deep embarrassment, maybe fear of association with Wilde's controversial reputation, a glimpse into social anxieties.
Yet, despite loving Paris, Fermina's summary of Europe was incredibly blunt.
Classic Fermina. 4 words of Caribbean slang. It's not so much, just cuts through all the potential hype, practical to the core.
So, fast forward years later, Fermina's back, she's pregnant, leaving church with Juvenal, and Florentino sees her.
A huge moment for him. He's shocked by her transformation. She's not the girl he knew. She's another person, a confident woman of the world. looks more beautiful than ever.
He sees them as this perfect couple.
An admirable couple, yeah.
Yeah.
Floating above the pitfalls of reality. The fantasy crashes into this undeniable, elegant reality.
And his reaction isn't jealousy.
No, it's great contempt for himself. That's the key. He suddenly sees himself as poor, ugly, inferior.
And realizes his long-held belief
That she'd eventually regret choosing Juvenal was completely wrong. A brutal but clarifying moment of self-awareness for him.
What an incredible arc for all three of them. We've covered so much ground. Dr. Urbino's idealism, his battles, Fermina's defiance, finding intimacy, Florentino's heartbreak leading to, well, a very complex life.
It really shows how ambition, society, even things like epidemics, just fundamentally shape our lives and how we understand love. It's about inventing true love, like you said, finding yourself in chaos, navigating all the messiness.
So a final thought for you listening. Think about your own life's clinical errors or unexpected turns, the things you resisted, maybe mourned. How might they have actually led you somewhere richer, somewhere different in understanding yourself?
Yeah, what truths about love or connection have emerged from experiences that initially felt like pure misfortune, something to chew on?